Today I'm going to show you a few ways to hide your jump cuts so your videos don't end up looking like this. Let's get undone. Gerald Undone. He's crazy. What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and I actually talk quite slowly but speed everything up in post. So I've got several tips and tricks regarding jump cuts that range from things you can do while shooting to little tweaks in edit to reduce the impact of the jump. And let's work through them in that order. So the first and most effective solution is to use two different camera angles. That way it seems like you just changed cameras, even though the second shot might take place several minutes later. But there are some things you need to know about your second angle so you don't end up with a cut that's just as bad. Basically, your second angle needs to be different enough to not look like another jump cut where the camera was accidentally moved, but not so different that it makes the viewer feel uneasy. And there's two basic rules to remember for this: the 30-20 rule and the 180-degree rule. Now, the 180-degree rule is not to be confused with the one for setting your shutter speed. This one's about camera angles and suggests that you should stay on the same side of the imaginary axis of your subjects. So right now you're looking at me from this angle, and if I was talking to somebody over here, you could move around me all the way across, but don't go behind me or exceed this 180-degree arc. The reason why is because if you do that, I'll magically jump from being on the right side of the frame to the left side of the frame if the camera ended up behind me. And this will make the viewer think that you have a continuity error and forgot which side the talent was standing on. So instead, aim for the 30-20 rule, which suggests that you should move at least 30 degrees from your primary angle and that you change the focal length by at least 20 millimeters, either wider or telephoto. And this is just a rule of thumb, so you don't have to hit these numbers exactly, but it does give you a good starting point. Now, for instances where you don't have a second angle or where your second angle doesn't help at the cut, the next best option is a B-roll cover-up. Insert some relevant cutaway footage before the cut and let it run until the point is made or until it feels natural to transition back to the talking head. And I said before the cut because it can often be just as jarring to have a sentence that starts on a cut also jump to B-roll at the same moment because it'll emphasize the fact that the audio is slightly different. But I'll show you how to deal with that audio problem at the end of the video. Now, if you don't have any relevant B-roll that you shot, then perhaps a stock footage library might be the answer, like the one from today's sponsor, Storyblocks. Storyblocks has an impressive collection of stock footage covering a wide range of subjects with unlimited downloads and 4K footage. They're also amply supplied with backgrounds, overlays, and After Effects templates as well. The interface is easy to use and navigate, and the clips are royalty-free for both personal and commercial use, so you can use them as much as you want, wherever you want. So if you think you could take advantage of a fantastic library of quality stock footage and effects, check out Storyblocks using the link in the description below. Now, this next tip is geared more towards this type of web presentation, but if you know while shooting that you've just entered into jump cut territory because you botched a line and maybe you're holding something in your hand and there's no way to perfectly reset to start the takeover, I'll tell you a little trick that I do to mask the jump cut as much as possible, or at least make it seem less jarring. I recommend throwing a little flair and flourish as you start the next take. Sometimes it's as easy as passing something from one hand to the next, or starting the motion of setting something down. One of my favorite ones to do, which you can see a lot if you go back and watch my previous videos, is to prime a new object in my other hand and then lift it up while lowering the other one very quickly. So let's say I was holding this lens and I botched the take, but my next sentence I started to talk about this hood. Well, I'll start the next sentence with this hand motion, and often when edited it seems surprisingly smooth, much smoother than had I just jumped to holding this lens in a different position. It's basically simple misdirection. You're just trying to redirect your viewer's eyes so they don't look at what you're trying to hide, which is that the position of this object has changed. And you can do this with other things too, like taking your glasses off and so on. If that's not an option though, for whatever reason, you can sometimes create the same misdirection but in post using a graphic or a lower third. If you look at my videos, you notice that my graphics from a previous paragraph will usually disappear with a distracting effect just as a jump cut happens. That way it draws your eye to the disappearing graphic or the appearing lower third so you don't notice that my head moved around weirdly. Sometimes though, none of the things that I mentioned will make sense to do, and you'll just have to deal with one of those unfortunate situations where you need to combine half a sentence from a previous take and the other half from a later take. And in that case, I recommend that you take a look at the smooth cut found in DaVinci Resolve. If you're not a Resolve user, it might seem crazy to switch to a different program for a single transition, but I was surprised at how good the smooth cut is when I moved over from Premiere. And since Resolve is free, if you're someone who finds themselves in this position a lot, it might be worth a look. I find that if my head didn't move too much, a smooth cut placed over just a couple frames will completely hide a jump cut. For example, I did one in that previous sentence. Did you see it? Position a lot, it might be worth a look. I find that if my head didn't move too much, and while we're editing, let's talk about audio, because little audio tweaks can be applied to every single method we've discussed to make the cut even smoother. Firstly, as I mentioned with the B-roll cutaways, you're going to want to use J cuts and L cuts, which are named that because they resemble J's and L's, because either your audio is cutting before your video or vice versa, but the point is that they aren't cutting at the same time because this will make the cut more jarring. And lastly, you're going to want to control the volume changes between the two sections of audio. Often after a bad take, we tend to start start our new take with more enthusiasm than you'll find at the end of the previous sentence. So we need to ramp up the volume at the end preceding the cut and fade in the audio following the cut. And you can do this with a little crossfade or constant power band-aids, but I find I get more precise results by keyframing my audio track. So I'll usually just put 2 points before a cut and ramp that one up to a louder volume, and then start the next cut lower and ramp it back up to normal volume. And then you can still put a little band-aid on there if there's a hiccup to hide, but overall it should sound much smoother. Passing something from one hand to the next, or starting the motion of setting something down, something from one hand to the next, or starting the motion of setting something down. So that's pretty much it. Let me know in the comments if you have any other tricks that you use to cover your jump cuts, even if they're odd and specific to your shooting scenario. I'd love to hear them. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video entertaining, or at least helpful, and if you did, make sure you leave it the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, then I bet your jump cuts even have jump cuts. Alright, I'm done.